Hey guys, Nino here. So real quick, I have a quick action for you guys. You can just download it for free in the description below, but I want to show you it real quick and kind of explain the premise of it. So all of these shots were selected for this demo because they all contain like a pretty intense amount of shadow, right? The dark side of them is pretty intense. You know, none of these are really soft and hazy, but sometimes you still want to add more contrast. You still want to add a little bit more of that dynamic sort of hit with the tonalities, but every time you add contrast in the usual ways, it gets muddled, it gets dark. Now you might think, oh, a mask. Yes, absolutely a mask is in order, but there's a really, really fast way. I'm going to show you how to do it real quick. Let's go with this image right here. Okay, so this is the fastest way to do it, and we touched on this before. If you create a quick mask of what you're looking at, that is, you make a selection from the luminosity of the image. Couple of different ways to do this. You can go to channels. If you don't have channels open, go to channels and then command or control click the thumbnail of the RGB channel. There it is. You have selected the luminosity of the image. Cool. That's one way, but there's a key command, and key commands are always good. So option command or alt control 2, and you have the exact same function. Done, right? Now we have a mask. What is this mask? Well, let's put out a curves adjustment layer while that selection was running, and it created a mask with that selection. Let's look at it. Hold down Alt or Option, click the mask. There it is. It is a black and white version of the image, right? That's what it is. But it's also a mask. And what do you notice about it? You might notice that the dark areas are masked out. In other words, the dark areas are, surprise, surprise, black or very dark gray and blending all the way into the highlights. So the highlights are more shown. That is, they're transparent or relatively, because that's how masks work. You have a built-in mask that protects your shadows. So with that, if I come back to my curves, let's use a preset that curves comes with, right? Like strong contrast, boom. And we're going to switch it from normal blend mode to luminosity to minimize color shifting. Now, off, on, off, on. Beautiful contrast boost. And we don't get our shadows muddled up. Now, how can we tell we're not getting our shadows muddled up? If I hold down shift and click the mask off, there's our muddled up shadows. It's all muddy. It's too much. But there it is. We can use our common sort of contrast boosting methods, but immediately mask it out. Instead of trying to finagle the exact luminosity mask that we want, we can simply do it with its own luminosity. And I've proven that because I have a action here that does it. So for example, let's go to this image and hit the action. Boop, there it is. Boom, 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 boom. This is what the mask looks like. It's just the image itself. All right, how about this image? What does it look like here? Boop. There it is. See, that's a very touchy one because there's definitely deep shadows in here, but we relatively protect them. And you can play with this more. I mean, we have the curve set up over here. And you might think, well, why am I adding low end if we're just masking it? That's the whole point. So that gradient, if you will, that sweep, that slope, that ramp, I have so many terms for this, okay, going from the contrasty area to the non-contrasty areas, the areas they're not affecting, can be directly blended nicely. Keep your shadows under control. Without it, shadows completely get lost. See that? How about this already high contrast studio shot? Let's try that. There we go. From there to there, there to there. And the details inside the shadows here are not utterly lost. Once again, to prove it, hold down shift, click the mask, too strong. And there it is. And you can do this with other methods as well. So for example, let's say I use a brightness and contrast and I put it on luminosity blend mode. Let's say I put that mask over to it. And now I can increase contrast, right? It's extremely subtle, but as you can see, it's increasing contrast, not in the deep shadows. See that? And of course, with the contrast and brightness slider, you quickly have the brightness slider if you want it there. See that? Very, very straightforward way, but a beautiful way to add contrast. All right, it's color chart time. There's no colors, but it's still a chart. Let's see what's happening. Okay, here we go. Let's run our action. All right, let's turn it off and on, off and on. You see how we're seeing contrast. This is the way you look at contrast when you have a gradient ramp like this, okay? Off and on. There's a smaller slope, a smaller ramp between the dark areas and the light areas. You see how it narrows right around here, okay? When I turn it on, it narrows here. It doesn't narrow in the middle because we're protecting the low end. In this case, the mask looks exactly like the original image, right? So you can see the ramp pinching, if you will. The narrowing of the ramp happens right here. If I hold down shift and turn off the mask, the ramp happens broader and wider. See, it goes from here to there. Now the ramp is more centered in the middle. That brings all that darkness up, right? But when we protect it, we're only creating contrast right up here. You see how that works? And of course, if I increase that radically, With the curves, you can still see our ramp is focused on the upper end of the luminosity range, not the lower end. You might think, oh, what if I invert? That's true. Let's invert our mask. There we go. Now we're focusing our efforts, if you will, on the bottom end, which gonna make a mess if you don't want shadow, like really clustered looking shadows. You definitely don't want this, okay? But you see what it's doing when you have a color chart. So just this last image, just for fun, we're gonna run it again. As you can see, we get a lot of pop and contrast, but we don't lose the shadows where they're needed. And if we turn it off, we see that the shadows kind of get muddy, right? And of course, this is just a default setting, standard S-curve for contrast. So when you download the action, adjust anything you want, and you can constantly keep changing it. And by the way, one last thing I want to mention, okay? And the color chart's the best way to do this. The contrast can keep getting exponential. We keep running it. Run it once, run it again, run it again, run it again. It's not just increasing the contrast, it is limiting the range even further. Every single time you run it, all these masks get tighter and tighter and tighter, okay? So you went from this to a very strong contrast, still protecting the shadows. In fact, the more you do it, the more it protects the shadows. So it can be compounded if you wanted to. Let's see what it might look like on this one. You can run it and run it and run it and run it. And you can see we still have details in the shadows. It's a little strong to say the least, but we still have details in the shadows. So it went from this to this, adding contrast while still preserving the low end. So download it below, and like I said, in the video description. Let me know how it works for you. Any questions, let us know.